Good morning, evening, afternoon to everybody following this channel. To with you, this is Victor Telles, aka Cristiano Moderno. We are going to be looking into Genesis chapter 29. Today's episode will be in English. El episodio de hoy va a ser una reflexión sobre Génesis capítulo 29. Va a ser en inglés el día de hoy. Now, let's remember that Genesis is part of the Torah, or what the Jews call the Torah, which is the first five books of the Old Testament, which in Catholic tradition we call the Pentateuch, and Protestants like to call these same five books the books of Moses, claiming that Moses wrote them, when indeed there are several reasons why we cannot assume or accept that Moses wrote them, which I will discuss in some other time. The reason why this is a part of the Torah, because it establishes why God gives Moses the law that he gives later on in the next book. Remember, I want to remind you of two things. Number one, we cannot judge the morality of the Bible based on our modern morality. There are things in play there that do not take part today. There are certain circumstances in biblical times that do not happen anymore today that are major reasons why certain elements of biblical morality or morality in biblical times does not apply to today, or vice versa. Let's begin. Now, I know you see here saying Genesis chapter 28, but in reality, we are in Genesis chapter 29. Let's go and read. It says, Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. It says the eastern peoples because if you were to look at a map, you would see that Padan Aram is not straight north, but northeast. As a matter of fact, you even have to cross the Euphrates to get to Padan Aram from where Jacob is going. It says, There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. Okay, what do we see? There are flocks gathering around the well, and there's a stone covering it. The fact that there's a stone there tells us a lot about this place. First of all, the heat. Why put a stone on top of the well? Well, it keeps the water fresh and cool in a hot day, number one. Number two, it prevents the water in the well from getting contaminated. Number three, we know that there are a lot of places, there's a lot of weather phenomena that happen in that part of the world. There's this Padan Aram, which is now lies in the border between Armenia, Syria, and Turkey. And certain weather phenomena take place there, such as a sandstorm so thick that it would suffocate, and this would in turn send dust and sand into the well. So this big rock would protect and keep the dirt from these sandstorms from falling into the well. Now, he continues telling us, when other flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Notice that the stone is large. For this very same reason, we realize that the shepherds have to wait for all the flocks to be gathered. Because of the size and the weight of this rock, it would take more than one person to remove the stone and to put it back. It would make no sense to take the stone off, to water one flock, put it back on, another flock comes about, they remove the stone, and so on. So they wait for everybody to be gathered so that they could remove the stone once, give water to all the flocks, and then cover the well once again. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. "Good, this is the place where he wants to go." So he asked them, verse 5, he said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, so you know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them, "Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said. "And he comes to his daughter Rachel with the sheep." Lo and behold, Jacob arrives, and now Rachel is approaching with the sheep. Now, Jacob turns and looks at them. In verse number 7, "Look," he said, "the sun is still high," meaning it's still early. "It's not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." It's like, "What are you doing? Why are you picking up the sheep so soon? Take them back." It appears that he wants some alone time with Rachel. Now, uh, and he also wants them to remove the water and then water the flocks already. But once again, it is not time. And they tried to explain it to him. "We can't," they replied, "until the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." So they tell them that they have to wait. While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel's daughter of his uncle Laban, excuse me for just a moment. I got something here. Okay, everything is good. Wait, what's going on? Here we are. Okay. Um, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. We see Jacob is being quite a gentleman for Rachel. The other shepherds do not move the rock, so he does it. But then we see Jacob continues to take certain steps towards Rachel. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. So Jacob sees Rachel approach. She comes, and now he has an emotional breakdown. What's going on, we may ask? Let's remember a couple of chapters ago, we saw that Jacob was a mama's boy, while Esau would go out hunting with Isaac. Jacob would stay home with Rebekah, his mother. Now that they sent Jacob away, Jacob had to step away from his mother's side, probably for the first time in ages. We can imagine Jacob growing up with his mother, Rebekah, telling him about her childhood, about her brother Laban, and so on. We could also imagine Jacob leaving home for the first time after being such a mama's boy and having to spend so many days all by himself as he crossed the wilderness just to get to Laban's home. As shy as he was, that he wouldn't even go and take shelter for, as we saw yesterday, he wouldn't take shelter at a given in a given area, in a given city. He much rather face the cold of the desert rather than to walk up to a city and ask for shelter for the night. But now this loneliness takes its toll on people, and it was beginning to take its toll on Jacob. Now he finally arrives to Laban's house. He meets his cousin Rachel for the first time. After so much time without having contact with his mother, because there were no cell phones then, obviously. He finally arrives to his mother's hometown of Haran. He is in a way getting back to his roots because he gets to know where his mother's roots. He gets to know his mother's hometown, and after being so attached to her, he feels this type of connection to this land, though he has never seen it before. And after having felt such loneliness and such a difficult time during his wanderings through the desert from um, Beersheba to Padanaram, a journey of over 800 miles through the middle of the hot desert without human contact, this finally has a strong emotional impact on him. Obviously, imagine being a Rachel. You see this stranger come to your town. He comes to you, embraces you, and then breaks down and start crying. What would go through your head at that moment? So we see that Rachel must be wondering the same thing. So then Jacob opens up and says to her, he had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and son of Rebekah, so she ran and told her father. He gives the news to Rachel that he happens to be Rebekah's son, and Rebekah happened to be a sibling of Laban, Rachel's father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, "You are my flesh and blood." Now, Laban, remember, last time Laban saw his sister Rebekah, Rebekah was getting engaged to get married to Isaac. Now, Rebekah has not only married Isaac, she had given birth to Esau and Jacob. And these two young men, Esau and Jacob, were now grown men, already old enough to get married. It has been at least 20 years since Laban knew anything about his sister Rebekah. And all of a sudden he hears this news about this stranger coming in here and saying that he is Rebekah's son. Not only did Jacob have that emotional impact, so too Laban finally gets to have some news about his sister. Who knows? Bethuel is possibly even dead by now. So by now, it's just Laban and his daughters, because we don't see any talk about him, about Laban's wife anywhere. So now he finally hears news about his sister. Mainly that his sister's younger son at that comes to visit the town. So he gets very emotional and runs to greet and welcome Jacob to his tent. He tells us that he embraced and kissed him and brought him to his home. Well, let's keep in mind one thing. For us in Western society, a man kissing a man is looked as not appropriate, let it be said. But we're not talking about Western culture here. Let's remember that the Bible was written by Jews in the Middle East, where the culture does not frown upon a man kissing another man on the cheek. 2 cheeks was a welcome. 3 cheeks was more. 2 kisses, one on each cheek was a welcome. Then 1, 2, and 3, that was an extra measure of fondness. So here he's showing us that Laban is so excited to see his nephew Jacob show up that now he is so moved with emotion because this is his sister's son he's welcoming. That's what he then goes on to say, "You are my own flesh and blood." That means he's recognizing him as part of the family. Hey, you are family, man. Come over here. Let me get a place prepared for you. But let's see what happens next. After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, Should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. So now Jacob has lived with Laban for 30 days. Now it's time for Jacob to start earning his keep. So he starts coming up to an agreement with his uncle Laban as to what is Jacob's job going to be and what he is going to be receiving in turn, what his salary would be. Keep in mind, the patriarchal period of biblical times, wealth was not measured in money or how many zeros your bank account had. It was measured on cattle, on herds, and in land. So they're negotiating here for Jacob's salary. But now, keep this in mind. Now, Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. That's one that they made a month earlier. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had lovely figure and was beautiful. Now, first of all, it tells us Leah had weak eyes. This is a Hebrew expression that says that her eyes were sensitive. She looked like she was a sensitive kind. She had nice eyes, but that's about it. But then it tells us that Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. In Hebrew, it tells us a very interesting phrase. It tells us she was Yafat Toar Veyafe Veyafa. Yafat Toar Veyafat Mereah. This means she had a very curvy figure. She had a very voluptuous body. She had a beautiful body and a beautiful face. She had it all. That's what this is referring to. Now, Muslims trying like to manipulate this verse, they like to manipulate to talk about Jacob marrying Rachel to say that, no, hold on, that Rachel was still only 3 years old, but we see it tells us clearly that she had a nice figure, which means that puberty had kicked in. She would have been at least, 17, 18 at least. Maybe, probably, possibly well into her 20s. Even though she was a younger one, the younger daughter of Laban. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Wait a minute. This, I know, throws red light for many of us, a red flag. Laban is Rachel's brother. That makes Rachel his cousin. Jacob fell in love with his cousin. For us in the West, in Western culture, Jacob marrying his cousin is frowned upon and is rejected as incest. This is the reason why I told you that we cannot judge the morality of the patriarchs under the same light as we guide our own morality. There's a lot more going on through this. Let's remember that Esau sent Jacob away to find one of his cousins to marry a cousin. Let's remember the words that Esau pronounced when he sent Jacob away. He said, not to take a wife from the daughters of the land of Canaan, but that he should instead go to his mother's hometown, to Rebekah's hometown, and choose from the daughters of Laban a wife for himself. That is exactly what he is doing. He is choosing from among the daughters of Laban a wife, and he has chosen Rachel. Why a cousin? Why not the Canaanites from amongst where he lived? Well, In Canaan, at that time, Canaan had a worship of many pagan gods. It would have pulled the people of God down to committing idolatry, worshiping gods like Asherah, the goddess of prostitution, Marduk, the god of war, and Moloch, Chemos. And the worship of these pagan gods and goddesses also carried along with it, in addition to the sin of idolatry, also a few more even serious sins. For example, if you wanted to make sure your harvest was great the following year, you would go up to a hill, to a mountain, find the greenest tree, and go into a prostitute there, so that the prostitute, who was considered a priestess of Asherah, could bless your harvest. Furthermore, and more specific to the context that Jacob is going through right now, in Canaanite religion, the custom was that the firstborn child would be offered up in sacrifice to Moloch or to Chemos. You see, in a pagan religion, in the Canaanite religion, when a woman gave birth to her firstborn son, she was expected to take this young child and deliver him to hold on and deliver him to his to one of his to Moloch or to Chemos, and deposit the newborn child in the hands of that statue, usually Moloch, who was portrayed as an owl with human hands outstretched like this. And upon those hands of that statue of Moloch, the young baby would be deposited. And under those hands, a fire would be lit. Now, you heard me right. The newborn child would be offered up as a human sacrifice, roasting the baby alive. Isaac knew this. That's why he told Jacob not to marry the Canaanites, so that Jacob would not be taken astray to the worship of the Canaanite gods and goddesses, and so that Isaac's grandson would not be offered up as human sacrifice. Isaac did not want his descendants to be consumed by fire while they're still young. So the alternative was to ensure that Jacob would marry one of his cousins who did not who was not part of these Canaanite practices. So you had two choices. Number one, go and marry. Well, we could say Jacob's family had two choices. Choice number one, marry one of the local Canaanite women and end up killing your own son on the fire, burning your own son alive, because that's what was expected. Or number two, going back home, marrying your cousin, and that way your offspring would be saved because you would be marrying into a like-minded family. We don't have Canaanite people nowadays offering the firstborn child in human sacrifice, roasting them alive to the god Moloch anymore. At least not in the way that they were doing it. Today, people still sacrifice to Moloch, but through what is called abortion. Yes, abortion is the continuation of that satanic practice of human sacrifice to the demon called Moloch. But we do not worry anymore about the need about marrying into pagan religion, because now we have throughout Western society a certain protection against burning children alive. Now you just kill them while they're in the womb. A lot of things says the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's what it's referring to here. But since Isaac did not want his grandson to be burned up as human sacrifice, he sends Jacob to marry his cousin. So Jacob comes, meets his cousin Rachel, falls in love with her, and now they're negotiating because he wants to marry her. So now, as they're negotiating, Laban is thinking salary, but Jacob is thinking dowry. Jacob wants to work so that he could earn the right to marry Rachel. So that Rachel's father, his uncle, sees that this is a hardworking man who would provide for his daughter. Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. 7 years. Why 7 years? 7 years has a strong signification, strong significance in the Bible. Number one, it's a sabbatical year. Number two, 7 means fulfillment of completion. The 7 in the term of 7 years implies the fulfillment of a pact. Number two, it's also a sign of within the sabbatical year, the 7 years represent liberation or again being freed from a covenant. And the number 7 means complete or perfected. Now we see Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, my time is completed." Hence the number 7. And I want to make love to her. Brothers and sisters, some of you may think it's not correct, translated correctly. Well, in Hebrew, the actual words is, "Hand me my woman, for I want to go inside of her." I think it's very explicit what he is saying. He has served his 7 years. He can't sustain himself any longer. He wants to marry her and he wants to consummate that marriage. So Laban brought together all the people of the palace and gave a feast. They're celebrating the wedding. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And in Hebrew it says, and Jacob went inside of her. Obvious what it means. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. Now, keep in mind, when a woman was married off, the father would usually give her an attendant because there are certain needs a woman has that Jacob, as a man, would not be able to tend to. She would need a female servant to help take care of her. And when the law of Moses comes about with strict prohibition of contact with women during the time of her month, even more so. But we also notice another thing. Payback. You heard me right. A couple chapters ago, we saw that Jacob tricks his father and steals the blessing. Now, his uncle tricks Jacob and gives him the wrong woman. Jacob worked 7 years to marry Rachel. Instead, he marries Leah off to Jacob. But there's another question that comes up. Why didn't Jacob realize on that very night, the very day they were being handed over, that he was getting the wrong woman? There are many things that take part of it. Number one, the veil. It was customary for the bride to wear a veil representing her virginity. She has not been known as of yet. This is where we get the modern tradition of the bride wearing a veil. It comes from this point. And originally, we see that the veil was not used as the weddings take place here in the United States just to decorate the hair. Originally, the veil was to cover the bride's face to signify that she is still a virgin. Now, Laban brings Leah. Leah's covered with a veil, so he does not recognize that this is Leah and not Rachel. Furthermore, Hebrew weddings, especially in these times, had a lot to do with heavy drinking. So by nighttime, Jacob must have been quite drunk. Let's be honest. He gets Leah, thinking it's Rachel, and they consummate the marriage. But when he wakes up sober the next day, lo, behold, there is a problem. When morning came, verse 25, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" So Jacob goes on and complains to Laban why he tricked him and given him Leah instead of Rachel. Laban answers and says, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." Watch what's going on here. Number one, we see that the older one would have still been without marriage, while the younger one's already married. In the culture to which Laban belonged, knowing that the older daughter had not been married and the younger daughter is already married, other men would come in and ask, "Why is the younger one married and not the older one?" And they would start thinking wrong of the other one. What kind of defect does she have? What's wrong with her? What problem does she have that she couldn't get a suitor or a husband and the younger one does? And that would obviously have brought problems to Leah, because in that culture, an unmarried woman was as good as gone. A woman who was not married was pretty much worthless, according to the way they thought in that time. So, in order to protect Leah's dignity as the older daughter and not put her to shame by marrying off the younger sister, they have to marry her off first. Now, the second thing that comes up is the fact that they mention of a marriage, a bridal week. In the Hebrew culture, in biblical times, a wedding took place not one day and night. The wedding feast was a whole week long, 7 days, to represent the consummation, the completion of that marriage. So then Laban promises that after this week is gone, then there will be another week of partying. This time it will be for the second wedding, in which Jacob marries finally Rachel. Wait a minute. Now Jacob has 2 wives. We go back to the same thing. In biblical times, men were not limited to just one wife. They were limited to as many women as they could afford. But since Jacob's job was to take care of his father-in-law's sheep, well, technically, his belongings were his father's belongings. So technically, he could afford them both because he was supporting them with their father's belongings. Therefore, Jacob could have had both wives. Now, uh, verse 28. Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So now there was 1 week of partying for his marriage to Leah, and right after there was another week of partying for his marriage to Rachel. How about that? Half a month of partying, half a month of celebration, half a month of celebrating this union between man and wife, or make that between man and wives. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and in Hebrew it says, Jacob went inside of Rachel, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. So we see he worked 7 years, then he marries Leah, then he marries Rachel, and then he works another 7 years to fulfill the contract that he agreed to in order to be able to marry Rachel. Now, we see then that among the two wives, Rachel was his favorite. Pretty much he was only with Leah, only mostly because out of the commitment of marriage, which also implied the consummation and the procreation of progeny. But really, Jacob's heart was with Rachel. Now, next we see the birth of the 12th tribe of Israel. For it is from here from Jacob and his feast and his wives that we get the 12 tribes of Israel. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. We see the same history repeats itself. Rachel is barren. She cannot bear children. Same thing with Rebecca. Rebecca was childless. It took a miracle for Rebecca to be able to give birth to Esau and Jacob. Further on back, we see the same thing of Sarah, Abraham's wife. 3 generations of women, all 3 women were barren, and through miracles, they end up giving birth. But we see that it is, according to the way the Masoretes, the writers of the Holy Bible, interpreted, God compensated Leah's lack of love by her being fruitful. And since Rachel had an abundance of love from her husband, God took the fruitfulness from her, at least for the time being. This is very important because in ancient Jewish culture, the fruitfulness of woman was very important. A barren wife was seen as a good for nothing. A woman who could not bear children was seen as a curse from God. Now it tells us here that that Rachel was not a curse of God, but that God did not see the need to give Rachel the blessing of children yet, because God needed to compensate Leah for the lack of tenderness from Jacob. Verse 32, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery, surely my husband will love me now. We see poor Leah aspiring to receive Jacob's love, not just her utility in childbearing. Reuben in Hebrew means, behold a son. So in essence, she is saying, Jacob, behold, I have given you a soul. Jacob, Reuben, Jacob, see a son. Kind of like telling him, see this son? It's our son. I have given him to you. My sister has not given you anything. Be mine. Leave her. Reuben being the firstborn. Now, later on, Reuben, we will talk about on another moment. There will be another day when we talk about the prophetic meaning of each of these children. But in the interest of time, we will continue with our reading for right now. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, because of the Lord, he heard that I am not loved. He gave me this one too. So she named him Simeon. Why Simeon? Simeon in Hebrew, Shemeun, means he has heard. It comes from the word Shema, which means to hear. Here in the Bible, names have a reason. Names are not given all because they sound nice. Names have a message to them. The name of the first son was Leah telling Jacob, look, I have given you a son. Love me now. Reuben, behold a son. Now, the second child is Simeon, Shemaun. He has heard. Why? God has heard. In naming the second son, Simeon, she is telling Jacob, God has heard that you do not love me. So now she has given me this second son so that you can love me. Now it's not one. I've given you two sons. Be mine. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth a son, she named him, now at last my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. So he was named Levi. Levi is a biblical word for emotional intimacy. Poor Rachel, after 3 children, she still longs for some tenderness, some love, some understanding from her husband. But her husband only sees her as a baby factory. With the third child, she says, well, I have given him a son. God has heard that he loves my sister. Now, this is a third child. Now, hopefully, he finally listens and gives his heart over to me. So hopefully, he becomes emotional with me. So, the name Levi symbolizes intimacy. Leah is wishing and praying that after 3 children, now Jacob finally really falls in love with her and not anymore with her sister Rachel. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Yehuda, Judah. Then stopped having children. Judah in Hebrew comes from 2 words, Yahweh, which is the name of God, and Hodah. Hodah in Hebrew is one of the many ways you say to praise. So Judah in Hebrew is Yehudah, which translates as may Yahweh be praised. So she is praising God that now she has conceived not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 children. And she is praising God that she has 4 children now, while her sister has none. Doesn't it feel like they're keeping score? This story continues on with tomorrow's reading. In the meantime, I'm going to say a few words to a friend of mine. Bendiciones, hermano Joseph Espinola. Como ves ahorita con el canal, ahorita le hablaré como en una media hora, hermano. Bendiciones. Greetings to one of our brothers from Ecuador, brother Joseph Joseph Espinola. Saludos hasta Ecuador al hermano José Espinola. Bendiciones. Long live Christ the King.